if you put any stock into what people are saying about you, whether good or bad, that's going to affect your performance. So you have to be able to have those blinders and be as focused as Kobe Bryant or something where nothing matters.
I've just finished an episode with world-renowned strength coach Jay Ferruggia. Jay's been responsible for training hundreds of high-level athletes, Hollywood stars and entertainers. And the subject in today's podcast is how to become an elite corporate athlete. Why business people should think of themselves as high-level athletes. How to structure your training, your diet, how to manage your recovery and gain that competitive edge so you can escape your own personal limits. There's about 25 years worth of knowledge packed into about 60 minutes worth of conversation with myself and Jay. I'd love to hear your feedback. Tell me what you think, and I really hope you enjoy this episode. Well, look, thanks for inviting me into your studio. This is your podcast studio, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah. But thank you for having me on, man. Appreciate it.
And we're in the heart of Santa Monica, which is where I guess like a lot of fitness industry and its traditional guys probably arguably sort of started around here.
It is the birthplace of physical culture. Yeah.
Not far from Muscle Beach.
Yeah. It's a 10-minute walk down that way.
So what brought you here then? Because you're not a California guy, are you?
No, I couldn't take another winter. I did 36 winters in Jersey, had to get out, can't do cold weather. And really just this, like the weather, the change of scenery, being around physical activity every day, seeing people doing everything from swimming to playing tennis to surfing, like that there's something about seeing that every morning, it keeps you moving, keeps you motivated. And also for me, it was a chance to reinvent myself. After 36 years, I had just gotten to a point where there was a lot of stuff going on internally, maybe my worldview, my beliefs, my self-limiting beliefs. And I was like, I got to reinvent myself. It sounds crazy now, but when you look at it, if I look back, I spent 33 plus years never thinking about personal development. Like it didn't even exist. This was just like who I am, this is what I do. I get up every day, this is what I do. And whatever's wrong with me is always going to be wrong with me. I'm not fixing it, and then I was like, no, that's not right. So I started just kind of working on myself and reading. I stopped reading so many training and nutrition books and reading about personal development and, getting into meditating and all these different things that were completely foreign to me for 33 years. But I said, you know what, I really want to go down this journey now, and I feel like I need to relocate and give myself an opportunity to start fresh, where I don't know everybody doesn't know me, maybe certain environments don't trigger behaviors or whatever. And so moving to the other side of the country really gave me the opportunity to do that.
Yeah. What do you think triggered that? Was that just age and you sort of get to a stage in your life where it's like, shit, I need to need to change things? Or was that, what do you think?
I don't know. People have asked me that question. I don't remember it being any specific event, but it's so funny because I have a couple friends, 3 friends that I've talked to in the past month who are 33 and they've just started that journey. And I was like, maybe it is. I don't know. At 33 you do that. But I think it was just maybe some books that people suggested to me. And then I started reading them. And okay, now I have this awareness. And now I see the things that I'm doing that I don't really like, the kind of patterns that I default to that I don't really like. And I was like, all right, well, how do I change that? And then I don't know what else it was, but it just must have been a series of events and meeting certain people, things like that. And it's kind of like, when you have awareness of something that you never had awareness of before, like I forget the name of the phenomenon. It's right on the tip of my tongue. Like when you've never seen a Volkswagen Beetle before and then you see one everywhere, so all of a sudden I had my mind open up to this possibility of change. And I was like, this is exciting. I want to go change some things.
Yeah, I had that. I can't remember reading many books in school, and
I'd read none. Yeah,
I remember someone. It must have been, I don't know, it was late 20s or around about that age, early 30s, and someone gave me a book called Thinking Big, and that book did the same thing to me. I was like, wow, this thing in between your ears isn't just as it is. You can kind of, work, train it, I suppose.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that was definitely one of the first books like that. Someone gave me that book too. Yeah.
So what was your background? Like I've read. If you pick up Men's Health and many magazines and look online, then your name's everywhere, and your reputation is sort of one of a great world-renowned strength coach. Tell us a little bit about how you got into that. How did you get to that position? And a little bit about your backstory.
Yeah, it was just as a kid, I was kind of the stereotypical weakling. I was insecure. I, kind of got bullied. Never the greatest athlete, but I grew up every Saturday morning watching Hulk Hogan, The Ultimate Warrior, and Bruce Lee, and Arnold on the big screen, and Stallone. And even younger, I was obsessed with superheroes, and I knew that I liked like Wolverine because they were super jacked, and I was like, oh man, I want to be kind of one of those guys, like a superhero or a larger than life figure. And so I kind of gravitated towards lifting because of that kind of stuff. And my cousin Christine started, this is like around 1987-ish. So I was like 12, I was around 13 years old. She started dating a professional wrestler. And to me, that was the coolest thing in the world because there was this big, huge jack dude who was around all the time because they lived 2 houses down from us. So I would hang out with him all the time. And then my dad was into bodybuilding like around the time with, some of the guys, Sean Ray and those kind of guys back in those days. And then when Yates took over, what was that, 92, 93 is when Yates started winning. And so I had started training a few years before, but I was getting nowhere. And then Dorian Yates came along with like this low volume approach. And so I started training like that. And I finally started making gains. And then it just became an obsession of mine where I trained all through high school, trained all through college. And then college, I started interning. I went to college with the intention of either hosting SportsCenter or directing films. I was a communications major. That's what I wanted to do. But then I just got bit by the iron bug. And so I was interning in the weight room. And then I started training clients in the summer. I got my first certification. And by the end of summer of sophomore year, I was on pace to make 6 figures as a 19-year-old, which was crazy because I didn't know anything about business. To this day, I still barely know how that even happened. But then from 19 until now, that's been my life, just training people and the whole fitness industry. And obviously, there's a lot of things that happened since then, but that was kind of the beginning.
Yeah, when I spoke to Frank Zane, he says, and I related to this, a lot of young guys kind of get involved in strength training and bodybuilding to kind of create this sort of shield because they've either had a dominant father or they got beaten up at school or something. Was that your background as well? Did you get beaten up at school?
Well, I was always the weakest kid, and I still remember. It's funny, if you gave me all the money in the world, I wouldn't have been able to think of the names of these few kids that used to torture me all the time and like steal my lunch money and steal my lunch. But recently I was, probably earlier this summer, I was in a float tank and I was kind of in a meditative state in there. And I thought of the 5 kids, and I came home and I said to my wife these 5 names, and she goes, "Who's that?" I goes, "Those are the 5 kids that used to chase me and beat me up and make fun of me. And those kids are why I had that chip on my shoulder for so many years." And so yeah, that was definitely a large part of it. But what's funny is the reason I moved here was because I went from 13 years old to 33, training for 20 years, went from 147 pounds at high school graduation to 225 pounds, built this suit of armor, definitely was better, had more confidence, but still I had a lot of things that I needed to fix. So you build this suit of armor, but eventually you got to dig deeper and kind of do some of the deeper, more serious work to really kind of get more evolved and self-actualize and closer to where you want to be.
Yeah. So you've trained, I don't want you to share the details of your clients, but you've trained a lot of sort of top athletes. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, I started, so my first athlete was an 8th grader who then I went on to train through high school and college football. And this is kind of the way the business blew up so fast, was I was training regular people, but I was like, man, I really want to train athletes. So Mike Schwab was his name. He's still a good friend of mine to this day, 25 years later. And Mike came in, he got great results within, and this is back, like now there's a sports performance training place, there's a CrossFit, there's an underground gym on every corner. There was none of that. You'd only go to like Bally's or Gold's or something like that, right? So I was really the only person around training athletes and the only person doing that kind of underground warehouse hardcore gym type of deal. And this is like 1995-ish. And so Mike comes in, he loves it. It's like nothing he's ever seen before. Within a month or two, he had referred me 2 other kids and these kids went on to, the one became the captain of the Columbia University football team. And the other, Mike, and the other kid set rushing records at their high school. So now all of a sudden everyone wants to know where are these guys getting these results. So within 6 months, 12 months, I just had high school athlete after high school athlete pouring in. Eventually these guys going to college. Some went on to play in the pros. Then in the off season they would bring me back teammates and stuff like that. So it kind of just blew up from there. So it was high school, college, pro guys, and that was about 12 years straight, 12 hours a day training people. That was what I was doing.
How did you evolve your skill and your ability to help people get results in the, from the sort of professional athlete side? How did you sort of, was it just something you had a natural instinct for, or was it, you just studied from people who were doing it really, really well? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I put every single dime I ever made back into the business. So it was always outfitting the gym with higher quality stuff, because we started with barely anything. It was a cheap power rack we bought at a garage sale or something, and some dumbbells. And by the end, it was a great gym. But then it was also education. So I'd buy every single book, training course, go to every certification, seminar, whatever it was. I mean, you name it, I would go and intern, learn from the best guys, whatever knowledge I could soak up from guys who were doing it better. That was what I always did for years.
Yeah. And how did you, what's the difference between, I guess, the knowledge that you sort of learn where I know a lot of people, they just constantly going on courses, going on workshops, but then applying that and then working out the difference between, well, maybe this is the right route to go down as opposed to this one. How did you, because I guess there must be a lot of conflicting information as well. You can end up going on everybody's course and spinning around in circles.
Right. Well, especially nowadays, it was a little easier, when you and I were younger, we didn't have as much info out there. I'm sure guys these days are more overwhelmed than I was, but it was kind of like the Bruce Lee approach, right? Like take what's useful, reject what's not. So I would learn from everybody. And then what I still do to this day, and some of my most successful, smartest friends, I notice that they do this too. So as soon as I learn something, if I read a book, whatever it's about, it could be about training, it could be about business, it could be about anything. I want to retain, the way I'm going to retain that information is if you and I go out to lunch later, I'm going to say, hey, here's what I learned. So I'm going to give my bullet points. So I'm teaching it to you. I might do a blog post about it. I might do an Instagram post about it. But I'm going to teach it. So back then we didn't have blogs and Instagram, but I would still go in, share that information with my friends, share it with my clients, and I would try everything out. Like if I went to a mobility workshop, I'm going to try all the mobility drills with all my clients that week. And then, a month later, I'm going to say, half of these I don't really love. But I'm testing it. I'm not just sitting there, because a lot of people just collect information. They'll read a million books. They never take action. So I'm like, let me try this out and see how it works. And so that's what I've always done. That's what I do. Like I said, to this day, is just read, teach, apply, and then go back to the Bruce Lee thing and kind of take, based on what I like and what I feel and what my clients are seeing, then kind of just refine it that way.
Mm. You talked about when you got to your 30s and you sort of shifted from the body to the mind. How much does the mind play in when you're training athletes to help them become a lot better, particularly in the most recent years? Is that an important component to work with as a trainer?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's so much that goes into it. You have, I think nowadays in 2019, when you get to a high level, but even honestly, if you're at a high school level, you have to block out so much noise because of social media and things like that. So I have friends and or clients who are at a super high level and they're on TV all the time. And it's like, if you put any stock into what people are saying about you, whether good or bad, that's going to affect your performance. So you have to be able to have those blinders and be as focused as Kobe Bryant or something, where nothing matters. Kind of like take that stoicism approach where, there's only three things you can control: your thoughts, your words, and your actions. What everyone else is doing and saying does not matter. So, just kind of reiterating that and getting people to be disciplined and obviously have habits is key. And I think a lot of that comes to simplifying. Like a lot of people would assume that athletes at a really high level are super dialed in on training and nutrition. Not true at all. They know as little as the guy down the street. So you have to simplify it. And sometimes it's a bummer for coaches, colleagues, myself, when you're like, man, I've studied all this stuff. I've invested $500,000 into my education, but I can only use this much of it because most people don't need it. They need it to be simplified. They need it to be sustainable, something they can do. You need to make it fun, even for guys at the highest level. Like I've been in NFL weight rooms where Pro Bowl players are like, dude, I don't want to train. Like, it's boring, you know? So there's all these things. There's the science, and then there's the art of it. And the art of it's more just knowing, you know, like, human nature and relating to people, you know?
With when you got people at that level, do you have to motivate them, or do they just come in ready, motivated to sort of push their limits, or have you got to try and sort of bring it out when they've had a bad day or a loss or something?
I think it's kind of a little bit of each. It's really individual. I mean, you'll have the guys that you have to dial back all the time because they're super motivated. They want to go super hard all the time. You'll have guys that are at that. Now, it's rare that someone's going to go high level and they're not a hard worker. They're going to be a hard worker, but they just might not be as hard a worker as some of the other guys. And sometimes they do have to be motivated. And I just think it's individual. It just kind of depends. Yeah. And that's a good coach. So you could say as a coach, oh, I only want to work with highly motivated individuals, but you might have a hard time paying the bills if you do that. Like, if you got to get better at working with everybody, I think.
When people are at that level, do they go through phases of where they're sort of up and down, or are they just consistent all the time, you know, when they come in for their training?
So in my experience, it's pretty much like all of us. Everybody's got their ups and downs. I know there's people like Kobe Bryant that I would imagine that are just always on that level. Someone like The Rock's probably always on that level. At least in my mind, that's who he is. You'd think Michael Jordan's always at that level, Derek Jeter. But for the most part, I would say they're just like everybody else. You know, they have their ups and downs. They have things going on in their personal life. Some days they just don't feel like it. Some days, and you know, this would be shocking for people to know, but some guys sometimes at the highest level still lack that belief in themselves. Like, they're not good enough. They're not, you know, whatever it may be, they don't have it. And it's crazy to hear that, because you're really? Like, wow, I look up to you, you know, but it's reality.
Is that in your experience as a coach, is that part of the responsibility that you take on to sort of help them with some of whatever those sort of mental blocks that are getting in the way of their performance?
Yeah, I think so. From day one, for whatever reason, I always did that stuff. Even with the younger high school kids, when I first started, it was always more than just the sets and the reps. It was kind of the mindset, the belief system, even improving their self-confidence. So I always kind of just naturally built that in, and I think that's an important component.
I've heard you talk about that as well, like, you know, how a lot of these people lack that confidence, or they've got something in their past that sort of holds them back. You know, do you think that's just something that is built in all of us, and we have to find an outlet to kind of, you know, manage that? Because you know, you talked earlier about sort of, you know, ignoring some of these things and thinking it's just how it is.
Yeah.
You know, what's your thoughts on that? I guess, you know, calling it brain health or mental health. What's your experience with that?
I mean, I've never known someone who's achieved a really high level of success that hasn't had some kind of rough patch or rough past or something. You know, I think that's kind of what motivates you. Like, if you just grew up and nothing ever happened, you had no struggle, like, you're probably not going to be that motivated to overcome some stuff. Now, some of it, you know, might be horrific. Some of it might just be something that left you with a chip on your shoulder. It could be that you didn't get love from your mom or dad. Like, it could be so many things. And if you use that as motivation, I think it can be good. It can also eventually be super unhealthy, and that's where maybe you got to do some work. And, you know, that's kind of beyond my scope sometimes. But yeah, I think in general we all have struggle, and we all use it a different way to motivate us, for sure.
Yeah. Do you see any similarities? Like, a lot of the people who listen to this are more in the sort of corporate world. Do you see links between, I suppose, a professional athlete in some kind of sports, and then a high level or any kind of sort of business person that's, you know, running, managing a lot of people, influencing a lot of people, and in the corporate world?
Yeah. I love that question, because I would say to those people, you should live and train the exact same way. Live, eat, train the exact same way as a pro athlete. Like, you are Kobe Bryant. You have to enter the boardroom each day taking care of yourself. And one of my good friends is super successful, and he refers to himself as a corporate athlete like that, where you want to be your best. Like, if you want to get up and go to work and have 4 highly focused hours, where in 4 hours you're getting more done than most people are in 8 to 12 hours, you need to be doing all that stuff. First and foremost, you need to be sleeping. 7-8 hours. I know it's a badge of honor to say, oh, I only slept 4 hours. I'm always on my grind and stuff like that. You're not going to perform. It doesn't matter. Like it's just physiology. So you need to be optimizing your sleep. You need to be doing all the kinds of stuff that a pro athlete would do, eating right. So now you have more energy. And you can be more focused when you're in a board meeting or talking to employees or whatever it might be. You need to take care of yourself with obviously proper nutrition, water, hydration, even stuff like knowing what's going to enhance your cognitive function, like coffee, MCT oil, things like that. Like guys that I know that are at that level, they're dialed in on that. They're taking the right supplements. You need to be training. You should be recovering like you're a pro athlete, which means getting massages, going for ice baths, sauna, whatever it might be. Like really treat yourself. Even if you don't play a sport, even if you haven't played a sport since high school and you're 50, treat yourself like that. And I guarantee you'll make more money. You'll be happier. You'll be a better boss, a better coworker, a better husband, a better dad, all these things.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess if you're, I suppose in some ways, if you're running a company or even running the team, I suppose if you're tired and a little bit sick and your brain's foggy, you can easily make a decision that could have a negative impact on other people, couldn't you? I suppose.
Yeah.
What are some, if you had to kind of break that down, let's start with training because it's one of the things I guess we're all involved in. What, for the sort of corporate athlete then, what are some of the rules that you would live by, in terms of, is it strength training? Is it cardio? Is it functional? What, if we start with training, what are some of the things that you think that, are good rules to follow in terms of, on a typical month? What would that be?
I think strength training is the most important thing. So that goes to the top of the pyramid for sure. It's the most important thing. And, basically, especially as you get older, you want, but I would do this even with people in their 20s now. So you need to train smart. You need to listen to your body. You do, big compound movements. People know push-ups, chin-ups, squats, deadlifts, things like that. But you do them with precision execution. They can't be sloppy. You shouldn't be doing a 50-rep snatch and things like this that you see people doing, because you don't want to get hurt. And you don't want to burn yourself out. Like we live in this high-intensity culture where it makes for a cool sneaker commercial or an Instagram video. But what a lot of people don't realize, if you're not a fitness professional, you might not understand this, but that actually saps your energy, and it kind of can deplete your testosterone levels and jack up your cortisol levels, and that's a stress hormone. So training has to be smart. So I basically recommend training, 30 to 45 minutes, strength training. Go hard, but don't kill yourself. Again, precision, perfect form. Listen to your body. Do that 4 or 5 times a week. You can even do that 3 times a week. And
what's that like? All body is that typically?
It kind of depends on the level you're at. So regardless of your age, you could be, if you started and you were 50 years old and you hadn't trained since high school, I'd probably put you on a full body workout 3 or 4 days a week. But if you've been training for a really long time, you've been training for 25 years and your joints are starting to get banged up, I'd put you on a split, because then I think it makes sense to sequence. Like if you're a meathead like me and you still want to do squats and deadlifts and press a bar, it makes sense to go in and do those third, where the rules of strength training are you do those first. So on a leg day, might go in, get a hamstring and glute pump by doing glute ham or leg curls, and then doing some kind of glute exercise, and then even doing a step up or a single leg squat. Now you're going to barbell squat. So it's fourth. So you're all pre-fatigued, you're pumped, your joints feel great, your hips, your lower back feels great. Now you're going to be squatting way less, but you're still going to be able to do it, and you're still going to get great results. And then eventually it becomes apples to apples when you compare your squat numbers 4 months down the road. But you feel so much better doing that. And what I like about that too is that decreases the amount of time you need to warm up. So if I were at 45, or if I were to go in and squat first, I'd have to warm up for 30 minutes. If I do that sequence, I could warm up for about 7 minutes and then have the same workout and feel much better. So it kind of depends on your training age and level, And
with just on that then, in terms of weight then, is your view that you probably don't need to lift the heavy weights that, you kind of see people talking about? If you reverse it around the right way, you can, when you get to your squats, you don't have to be putting a lot of pressure on your lower back and your joints.
But I still think you should go heavy on everything. I still like people doing, generally 6 to 10 reps on stuff. It doesn't mean when you get older you should just be light, high rep pump stuff. I think that's a waste. I think you still go heavy, but if you're doing that sequencing and you're doing a set of 6 to 8 on a squat, and maybe you're taking a 4-second negative, it's not going to be as heavy as if you did it first, but I still want you going heavy and hard. That's key, because you need to build muscle, and as you get older, you need to prevent the loss of muscle and bone loss as well, So that's basically your thing is strength training. As you get older, you lose fast twitch muscle fibers. So anyone, no matter what age, sprinting is one of the best exercises you should do. So I think everybody should sprint once a week. It makes sense to learn how to sprint properly so you don't get injured, or just sprint with a sled behind you or pushing a sled, or sprint up a hill because that's way safer. And my favorite athlete of all time was Walter Payton, the greatest running back ever for the Bears. So I started doing hill sprints, I think even before I started lifting, like in 1985 when the Bears won the Super Bowl. So I think you should sprint once a week. You should lift heavy 3 to 4 days a week. And then, I like you said, I like doing cardio outside. I don't think it makes sense to drive 15 minutes across town to sit on the bike inside. Like go outside, bike, hike, swim, surf, be active, do stuff like that.
And what about, like, it's popular at the moment, HIIT training. So where you're sort of elevating your heart rate and then you're doing strength training. What's your thoughts on that? Are you saying just separate them, or is HIIT training just a craze?
I like strength training as the foundation, and then if you want to do some kind of HIIT interval for 10 minutes at the end of a workout, I don't mind that. But on the in-between days, I think you should be doing lower intensity recovery stuff. So going for a long 45-minute bike, or you could even mix it up. Like if you were inside and you wanted to go on the Aerodyne bike or the Aerosol bike, and then the rower and the ski erg, and do that, but keep your heart rate low on those days at 130 to 150 for 30 minutes. I think that's great. I think we got so much into the HIIT craze that people are always going super high intensity. And like I said, most of our lives are super high intensity, especially if you're that business owner guy where you're working hard all day, you're getting up early, you're drinking too much caffeine, so your adrenals are fried, and then you're just doing HIIT all the time. Doing low intensity cardio stuff, it fell out of vogue, but it's really good for longevity, for health, for recovery, for sanity, there's so many studies recently about cognitive function with it. Obviously, we know about for heart health. So I think it's really important on the off days to do some of that stuff, and then keep the HIIT stuff to 1 or 2 days per week at the end of a workout, or separate on those 2 days 4 to 6 hours. Like in the morning, do some sprints, and then at night, do your squat workout.
Right. And what about the sort of functional training, sort of multi-direction stuff, as opposed to you said some of the traditional things like squats and bench, etc. Do you fit that into your week?
Yeah, I think it's important to do that too, because again, as you age, you want to maintain all those qualities, to change direction, to jump, to throw, all these different things. So absolutely, I think that's beneficial. I think for somebody who's coming in who hasn't trained, and you and I both know that as a beginner, you want to see results fast. So we're going to give them the best bang for your buck exercises that's going to transform their body. They're going to feel stronger, and then give them more complex stuff as we go through. So I don't want anyone doing kind of like, lateral skier lunges the first they get in the gym or things like that. But eventually then we start to put in all that kind of more functional athletic stuff. But I think at first just build that base and then go from there.
And if you are, I guess, for most people in business, it's sort of 12, 14 hours a day. If you can't do twice a day, which I would struggle to do.
Yeah.
What would you say is in terms of the different types of training? How many days would that be, and for how long?
Yeah, so I would do 3 high intensity days where you do some kind of, let's say, explosive warm up. So you jump or throw or sprint or do an Olympic lifting variation. So you're getting some of that speed and explosive power work in there. 1 to 3 exercises where you're just doing heavy, 5 to 10 reps. And then 1 or 2 of those could be on that day, some change of direction stuff or whatever. And then you could finish it up, again, like I said, with something that's a high intensity drill. But that could be so many different things. You could be doing cone drills, you could be pushing sleds, you could be doing battle ropes, you could be doing kettlebell swings. There's so many things. But I think having those 3 high intensity days and then the lower intensity stuff on off days. And on the off days, that could be yoga, that could be 30 minutes of mobility flows, things like that.
Just on the workout side, what are some of the things that people do wrong, particularly guys as they get into their late 30s and 40s? What are some of the mistakes that people generally make that they probably want to stop?
Yeah, I think just well, 2 things, and they're at the opposite end of the spectrum. So I'll hear from people that I just don't have time to do it. So the mistake is thinking that you have to drive 20 minutes across town to the gym. You got to warm up for 20 minutes. You got to do an hour and a half workout. That's 2-3 hours of your day. I get that people wouldn't want to do that. So I'd say to those people, well, something is better than nothing. Like if that's the option, don't just stay home. So now let's do 20 minutes of training, if not at the gym, at home. Like you can get, some suspension straps and do some inverted rows, some push-ups, some single leg squatting things. So I think that's mistake number one, is thinking that it has to be more overwhelming than it is. You can easily get a great workout done right outside there. And then at the opposite end of the spectrum is you have people who do way too much. They just think the more I do, the harder I train, the better my results are going to be. But that just you end up burnt out. And a lot of times you end up with health problems that you can't get rid of for 6 to 12 months just because you're always training, you're always under eating, you're undersleeping, you're over caffeinated, you're overstressed, and your whole body's just going to break down. Like stress from breaking up with your girlfriend or getting fired or losing a bunch of money is the same stress from going for doing a sprint session or a deadlift workout. It's all stress, and eventually it just compounds and breaks your body down. So that's why I always tell people to do less. Yeah. And when people start with me, they're like, that seems like so short or so little. I can't believe we're not doing more. I got to do more. And I was like, why do you have to do more? Who told, where'd you get that belief? It's just from watching TV and other people that you think you have that belief. You don't have to do more. And then a lot of times when they don't, they feel so much better.
Yeah. One of the things I've heard you talk about is that sort of always be ready. And I know for me, sometimes, my training years ago, it's like, after a leg session, I wasn't doing anything for 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
Tell me about that philosophy and why you think that's important for people nowadays.
Yeah. I just always like that because I think that, nowadays especially, we do live in a fairly scary world where things happen, like crazy things happen that didn't happen when you and I were growing up. So to be ready for that, for sure. But then just to be ready for I went through the same progression of probably training early, like you were a leg day, you were crippled for 4 days. And then I was like, man, I don't really want to do this anymore. I live in a great place, and I think there's so much more to it. And I've noticed so many guys who went through that meathead journey where that was all they did was lift, But I wanted to be able to surf and hike, and people I train, just if someone calls and they're in town, let's at the drop of a hat, we can go do that. Whereas I'd have to go, you know what? I got to do this tomorrow. I got to go legs tomorrow. I did back yesterday. I'm super sore. Yeah. Things like that. So always be ready. You could always be ready for that. And that means you don't burn yourself out. You don't crush your joints with big lifts that are going to do that. And you don't want to get extra sore because then you can't move, right? So when I'm designing a program for someone, I'm thinking about, where's that stretch position movement going? Like an RDL, right? If you do heavy RDLs for a lot of sets once a week, you can't walk for 3 days. So I need to take all that into account. Where's those exercises that are making you sore? What do we have to do to eliminate that? So slightly lower reps, keeping the exercise in longer. Like an exercise that takes longer to adapt to, like an RDL, we can keep that in longer. That way you get used to it. You don't get as sore. There's a lot of little tricks we can do so you don't get as sore and beat up. And I just think people feel way better like that.
For just RDL?
Romanian deadlift. It's like a stiff-legged
deadlift.
Yeah.
And so, moving on to the sort of diet and nutrition then. Again, a lot of trying to simplify things. There's a lot of diets. Everyone's talking about keto at the moment and low carb and high fat and low fat. What are some of your principles for, busy executives that just want to make sure they're keeping themselves in good shape, but they're able to perform at their highest level? Yeah.
I don't think you have to do anything as extreme as keto or carnivore for most people. I think if you, just eat real food that, people hundreds of years ago could eat, and so it's single ingredient, real food, you're not going to go wrong with that. It's going to be hard to feel terrible and be in awful shape if you adhere to that. Then once you can stick to that, we've decided you could stick to that because let's be real, like a lot of people are coming from eating, fast food and donuts and things like that. So if you take them to something so extreme, it's not sustainable. So let's get you on real food. So I don't care. You eat 20 sweet potatoes a day if you want. And, grass-fed meat, vegetables, berries, avocado, olive oil. Eat enough of those foods. Because a lot of people, too, are sick even though they don't know they're sick. They're so stressed out. So just eating real foods is going to heal you. And let's not even worry about weight loss yet at the beginning. You're going to lose weight. You might lose 15 pounds of inflammation. Like if you're just eating wheat and soy and sugar all the time, and I switch you to the same exact amount of calories but from good stuff, I've seen people drop 15 pounds from inflammation in like a week or two. So let's get on those healthy foods. And then over time, once you start hitting a wall and once you start getting more into it, you'll notice, well, okay, let me try maybe cutting out grains. Okay, now I feel great, but I notice oatmeal I can eat and other grains give me a headache or whatever. You become more aware of it over time, and then it's up to the individual to decide, you know, how high you want to take this. Do you want to go super strict? So for me and the most people that I consult with and work with, it's a pretty sustainable plan where I'll be pretty much paleo, but I'll have white rice a few days a week after a hard workout. And then honestly, once a week, I'm going to have some ice cream or crap, you know, pancakes or something like that. And that's pretty sustainable. And I feel pretty good with that. But again, probably twice a year, I'll do a 30-day really strict where it'll be, I won't touch anything. Like I'll cut out all artificial sweeteners and things like that, just because gut health is important. I think that is a chance to kind of reset and you feel way better. And then you can reintroduce foods and know for sure what's causing kind of, you know, some weird symptoms. But just simple and sustainable, I think always works.
And when you're in the 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, are there any things like, you know, good things for breakfast or good thing for lunch? I know sometimes if I keep my lunch pretty simple to a bit of protein and some greens, I don't kind of have that afternoon where I sort of energy drop. Is there any sort of simple rules in terms of 9 to 5?
I think for performance at work, for kind of like that corporate athlete, I do think it makes sense to keep carbs low during the day, higher fats in the morning, good protein, vegetables. Do that throughout the day, and then either after your workout, or, you know, some people like carbs around the workout before and after. That's individual. But when you train, some carbs after, and then some carbs at night to kind of help with the serotonin release and chill out. I like that. The only thing I'll say to that, and even intermittent fasting is good sometimes for busy people, but the caveat I'll add to that is, if you're really high stress and your cortisol, which is a stress hormone, is through the roof, you may need to have carbs at every meal for a while until you get that in check, because that can kind of exacerbate it if you're going really low carb, especially intermittent fasting. So that's something to play with. But generally low carb and healthy fat throughout the day, like you said, you won't have that crash.
You talk about inflammation, and nowadays if you read, you know, different supplements, and everybody's talking about inflammation. What is that for the person who doesn't really understand, and why is it something you should be aware of?
Yeah. So to keep it simple without getting to the science of what's actually happening, it just causes, literally, you will feel, and it's funny because you don't know this. You might think, oh, that's just the way I'm supposed to feel because I'm 38 or I'm 46, so I'm not going to feel like I felt like when I was 18. But if you remove foods that are typically known to cause inflammation, like gluten and sugar, dairy for some people, you know, trans fats, if you remove those for 30 days, now all of a sudden, wow, my fingers don't hurt anymore, which is weird. My elbows don't hurt. Oh, that thing in my neck went away. And sometimes you'll even notice that you breathe better because everything gets inflamed. You know, sometimes even your nasal passages, not just your joints, everything kind of gets inflamed. You could have inflammation in the gut. All of a sudden, you're like, wow, I feel lighter. I'm bouncing around. My arthritic pains don't hurt as much. So it's just by really removing those foods. And then I think once you feel what that's like, you don't want to eat those foods again because now you know the difference. So when I was saying that I'll have pancakes or something once in a while, there's certain things that I eat, I wake up the next day and I'm like, oh man, never again, because you don't want to experience that, you know. And as you get older, I think it becomes more important to you just to feel better than to have that 5 minutes of pleasure of eating the pizza.
Does some of the training then could add to that inflammation? I guess that's what's going on in your muscles, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. That's why I think people overdo it with volume. So I've since Yates in '93, I've always kind of been a low volume guy. Like I've tried phases of high volume forever. I've gone through it. I've tried it with clients, but I always get better results with, if I'm going into a workout, I like to work up to 1 to 2 sets, like top end hard work sets. So let's say I was doing an upper body push day and I did incline dumbbell presses first. I might do the 35s for 8, the 50s, the 70s, the 85s. And then my one work set is the 90s, let's say. And then I'll say, okay, do I want to do one back off set, one heavier set, and then I'll move on to something else. And then I'll do a few ramping sets, because those, you don't just go right to your top end set because you get hurt, right? So the sets are good for practice, for neural priming, for locking in your technique, and for safety, and also for getting a pump. Like It's just safer to do exercises with a pump. Like a lot of times people get too caught up these days with doing all these little activation drills and mobility stuff, but there's still something to be said for getting a pump. Like that feels way better and safer. So I like, high quality, lower volume stuff, and then you'll have less inflammation. Just simply, if you do the exact same workout but cut the work sets in half, you're going to have less inflammation. And you'll actually have more inflammation too if you do higher reps versus lower reps, which I think people don't understand. They think if you do sets of 25 on everything, you'll have less joint stress and less inflammation. But there's even studies now that show that the higher reps will cause even CNS fatigue more so than the lower reps, which is crazy. And too much aerobic training actually causes more CNS fatigue than just doing central nervous system fatigue versus doing like a hard lifting session, which is crazy because we always thought it was the exact opposite of that years ago. Right. But now when you think about it and the times you've done it in your life, sometimes it makes sense. You're like, oh yeah, that's true. I'm always more wiped out after a long endurance activity than heavy weightlifting.
So you're normally sort of 6 to 8 reps then, are you?
Generally, yeah. Because I think it's a lot safer because it's really hard to maximize tension and do perfect technique. The way I teach it and the way I believe it should be done for more than that. So if you're squatting and I'm having you corkscrewed into the floor and everything's turned on and you're gripping the bar, like to maintain that tension and that focus and that tightness where every muscle's turned on, so you're protecting your spine, you're protecting your knees because your hamstrings and glutes are activated. After about 6 to 8 reps with an empty bar, you're wiped out. Same thing with a bench press or something. You're wiped out if you're doing it right. So 6 to 8 on big compound stuff. And then, if you were doing a lateral raise or a curl or something, you could bump it up to 10 to 12 reps. But I think it's just safer and for always being ready, you feel better that way. You don't get as much fatigue, you don't get as much soreness.
Yeah. And what about recovery then? It's something that seems to be, again, talked around a lot. What does recovery mean? Does it assist in this reduction of inflammation and just, again, your ability to perform? Because I guess if the goal is that you want to be whether it's a corporate athlete or just a athlete at home with your wife and your children, then, getting the most out of your performance is key. What are some of the important things that need to be done for recovery, including sleep and duration, that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so recovery starts the minute you finish your workout because you can't just go in, smash yourself super hard like it's a Rocky training montage and then just go about your day and think that you're going to come back tomorrow and be fine. There's things that you need to do to enhance that. So it begins the second you it actually begins in your workout. If you've done all the things I've said and trained smarter, your recovery is going to be faster. Now, when you finish your workout, you don't just want to walk out and sit in the car in a static position because things are going to get tight and that's not good. So you want to do some post-workout stretching, but you really want to do some deep parasympathetic breathing where you're expanding your rib cage and contracting it. So you're inhaling for as long as you can, holding it, then not letting your shoulders raise up, and then exhaling until your rib cage gets really small. Do that for 1 to 3 minutes, just kind of sitting or lying on your back at the gym. And what that does is when you're in a hard workout or a sprint session or a game, you are in a sympathetic nervous system dominant state, which basically just means you're in fight or flight. You don't want to most of us walk around in fight or flight too much these days with, our phones and coffee and work and all this. So you want to get back into the opposite, which is rest and digest or parasympathetic. And that helps you recover. So you have to take a few minutes at the gym, do some stretching, do some foam rolling, do some breathing. Maybe like there's one gym that I go to where I know the streets that I'll walk after a leg workout, especially because you don't want to sit in the car and just with that blood pooling in your legs. So I'll do a 20-minute walk outside after. I'm breathing during that. So that's where recovery begins. Then post-workout nutrition, your muscles are depleted of glycogen, amino acids, so you want to replenish that so that way you'll feel better the next day. And then if you can do it, if you have a gym that has a sauna, hopping in a sauna right after is great. I mean, there's a lot of research recently that shows that sauna is amazing for longevity, for health, for cognitive function, for heart health, and even reduces all-cause mortality by something crazy like 50 or 60% or something nuts when you do it for 30 minutes 3 times a week. So if you can get in there right after, great. And then I would say those are the main things, and then of course always the top is getting sleep. Sleep, like people will do all the other, and people still fight this. Like they'll do everything else I'm saying. They'll spend thousands on supplements and pills and drugs and no, I can't sleep. I'm too busy. But what else can I do? Well, sleep's the main thing. The number one testosterone boosting supplement, sleep. Like the number one cognitive enhancing supplement, sleep. But people just want to buy all the pills. But if you really put all your focus on sleeping, everything gets better. You'll build more muscle. You'll be happier. You'll be leaner. Your hormones will be better. Your sex drive will be better. Your function, your focus will be better. So you have to work on getting that sleep locked in.
So in terms of sleep, you hear about and read these stories of the people that are sort of 3 to 4 hours a night, super top executives, and they can manage with just that short amount of sleep. In your experience, is that true, or are you saying that if you're working and training that you really need to have a certain amount to be able to build yourself back up again?
Yeah, I mean, we hear those stories, but I think those are outliers. There's just no way. I've never known anyone who didn't increase their sleep quality and everything didn't improve. So I think the perfect sleep routine starts in the morning. So if you can get outside in natural sunlight early in the morning, soon after you get up, maybe 10 minutes to an hour after you get up, no sunglasses. If you live somewhere it's nice enough, you could take your shirt off. The more sun exposure you can get, that's going to kind of set you up for the day to have a good night's sleep. Then things like caffeine, cutting caffeine off by 12 or 2, depending on the individual. Not training too late. If you have trouble sleeping, if you train too late in the evening, sometimes that'll crank you up and it'll be hard to sleep. And then you want to pay attention to your meals at night as well, where you can do stuff like wear a Whoop or an Oura ring, and it will tell you kind of the quality of your sleep or your HRV, and what you'll do is you'll start to see how your meals at night affect you. Like, oh, if I have white rice, all of a sudden my blood sugar spikes and I'm wide awake at 4 a.m. Whereas if I have a sweet potato, which is a little lower glycemic index, has some fiber, then I'm completely fine. I sleep great. So just being aware of that, and then having that nighttime routine where on our TV. We have the dimmer button, and I put it down to where you can almost barely see the screen. Like sometimes Jen will be like, I can't even see the screen. I'm like, no, we have to get ready for sleep. So you want to dim the bright lights. If you have to use your computer, make sure you have like that flux thing or whatever it's called, where it has the I forget the name of it, but it instead of the blue light, it becomes like an orange light. Yeah. You know what I mean? And the same thing, you can get one of those apps for your phone. But ideally, you want no screen time for 2 hours before bed. So my phone's always off, computer's off, and like I said, the TV's, you almost can't even see it. And then even the lights in the house should be low. We use really low, like dim lighting, and candlelight at night is great. And then see, there's things you can. Some people are knocked out if they have an ice cold shower or an ice cold bath. Some people, a hot shower works better. You want your body temperature should be low to fall asleep. You want your room to be pitch black, and you want it to be about 66 to 68 degrees. I personally, if I take an ice cold shower, I sleep great, because then I'm kind of chilly and you're cold. You just want to get cozy under the covers, But figure out what works best for you. But pay attention to it and actually journal it, because it's that important,
And what in terms of hours, then, is there a band that you think is a good minimum that you should be aiming for?
7's minimum. Yeah,
7.
You got it. Yeah, you got to get 7. Yeah. For the first time in probably 2 years, I slept 9 hours the other night, and the next day it was amazing. I had the best workout. I was so productive. I was so focused all day. It was great.
And I guess there's something to be said about quality as well, because I know sometimes I can lay in bed.
Yeah.
And it's just like you don't feel as though you've slept, and then other times I'd have a short but just deep. Yeah. And you feel wonderful.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, getting in that deep REM sleep is great, and that's why I do like tracking things with the Oura ring or something, because it shows you that. Then now you have something to measure. Okay, what do I have to do to improve that?
Right. I've heard about those Oura rings. Are they pretty?
I like them. Yeah, I like it, because it's what gets tracked gets measured, and then you want to improve it. So seeing that score on your phone every day kind of says, okay, let me be more cognizant of what I'm doing the last 4 hours before bed and what I'm eating and things like that.
Right. So it just basically tells you the quality of the sleep that you've been getting.
Yeah. It tells you actually how it breaks down your REM sleep, your deep sleep, all this stuff, and then it shows you your heart rate variability and everything, which is pretty cool.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's your thoughts then in terms of that recovery stage on sort of alcohol or cannabis, which is very popular in this part of the world at the moment?
Yeah.
What does that assist in relaxation and recovery and rejuvenation, do you think?
So I'm a fan of THC and cannabis, one and the same. I think the world we live in is very unnatural. You know, everything we do is very unnatural from how we would have evolved as humans back in the beginning. So, and for me, and I would assume for you, you're kind of very driven, motivated person that it's hard to turn off. Yeah, because it is for me. So, and I think if I lived in Montana in the woods, maybe it'd be a little bit easier, but that's not my life. So, you know, a few days a week, I'm going to take an edible and kind of just chill out. And that does help my recovery a lot. My inflammation's better. On those nights, I could sleep 8 to 9 hours, and I wake up feeling great, feeling refreshed. Whereas alcohol, I just don't see the benefits. I've seen plenty of studies and research on THC, but alcohol, I don't really know of any benefit. Like, it's a social lubricant, and fine, you have fun for a little bit, but you're going to wake up kind of dehydrated. You're going to wake up with a little bit of a hangover maybe. You don't feel as good no matter what. But if I take a 5 milligram edible, I wake up ready to tackle the world. I feel great. So. And
what is, so in terms of that edible for people who can't buy them, so what is that? That's just like a cannabis inside a tube thing?
Yeah. So there's, I have mints and, what do I have? I have dark chocolate covered espresso beans or blueberries. But the healthiest one actually that has no junk in it, it's like a pill. It's like a vitamin D pill, and it's just THC in coconut oil. So you're not even getting any artificial sweeteners or any junk or anything. Just pop one of those at night and just chill out and relax. Because I always say to people, it's not a cliche. Laughter is the best medicine, right? So at the end of the day, if you haven't laughed, I think that's really bad. Yeah. So, and that's why I say to people, like, surround yourself with funny people. But at the end of the day, I always tell clients of mine, like, if you haven't laughed, sit down, put on Dave Chappelle or Seinfeld or whatever makes you laugh. And that should be part of your day. Like, you have to laugh every day, because that's two of the things that are overlooked. Again, people will buy all these pills and do all this stuff, but social connection is the number one factor. When they study the blue zones, they're like, is it their diet? Is it their environment? No, it's a strong social connection. We're social creatures. We evolved in groups of 30 to 40 people where we'd always be really close together. We would sleep all close together, close to the ground. We're tribal people. So when people are isolated and people spend all this time on their phones and everything, they're like, oh, I can be alone. That's not really true. It's not good for you. It's really healthy to spend time with people. So book time for, going to lunch with your friends and going out at night with friends and having them over and spending time with your husband and your wife or whatever, quality time where your phone's off. And so that and laughter, like social connection and laughter. It's not sexy, it's not a pill, but like if you do those two things, your life is going to be exponentially better. And so if you need to calm down a little bit and pop a 5 milligram edible for those two things to be better, hang out with your friends and laugh a lot, then so be it. I think it's going to extend your life.
Do you know if there's any studies on laughter at all, on how it affects you?
I should know that. I know that Yakov Smirnoff, who's a famous Russian comedian and is now a professor at some school. I don't know exactly where, but he put out a thing, and there was some he was quoting some kind of research or something in there about how laughter affects certain things. I don't really remember it specifically.
I read a book about depressed people and how they just got them. I think they put a pencil in between their mouth and just got them to smile for a period, and how that affected the mood, just their change in their physiology. And I suppose when you say laughter, like when you get older, I guess you generally don't laugh as much anyway. Like my wife does, and my children do. But when you can kind of become a grumpy old man, like you have stress at work, and then you're serious in the gym, and then you come home and you're reading stuff, and you don't laugh. And I suppose when you say it, it's like, just imagine, even maybe once a week for some people is a stretch. Certainly could be for me. And I suppose if that changes your, I suppose, the way you feel and your sort of hormones and takes you out of that fight or flight. What do you call it? Parasympathetic.
Parasympathetic, yeah.
I suppose that's naturally going to take you out of that mode, isn't it? If you're laughing.
Yeah.
You're not laughing when you're sort of running away from something.
Right. Yeah.
It's a very simple one, but it's an interesting. I have to make that one of my sort of objectives for next year. Try and laugh once a day.
Yeah.
So look, tell us about you. Obviously, I've sort of known you for a while, and there's some fascinating reports. Everything you do in men's health. there's some brilliant stuff I'd recommend people to read. But if you could sort of, again, break down some of the key areas where people can find out about you, your work, your workshops, do you want to just share that?
Sure. Us? Yeah. Podcast is renegaderadiopodcast.com. And then my pretty much everything's on my website, which is jay.fit, because my last name is really hard to spell and remember. And I'm most active on Instagram at Ferruggia. That's about it.
Yeah, and you also have your what do you call them, like your sort of weekend workshops that you do?
Yeah, that's renegadeexperience.com. We do those anywhere between 4 and 6 times a year out here in Santa Monica.
Right. Okay. And what just briefly for people who might be interested, what sort of stuff happens in one of those?
Yeah, it's kind of a men's retreat meets like an ultimate fitness vacation. So we do a variety of different workouts and training. I run a bunch of workouts. I have some of the world's best experts in self-defense, in mobility, breath work, boxing. And then we'll hike, we'll surf. It's really just a fun weekend, but it's also bonding. It's kind of intense, deep dives, and kind of roundtable just discussions with men only that we really don't have in our society. So it's kind of like a reconnecting tribally again, and it's really powerful. And so guys leave the weekend having an amazing experience and having always met at least one friend that they'll be super close with for the rest of their lives. And they learn a bunch about fitness and training and health, and it's awesome. It's one of the most fun and rewarding things I've done in 25 years I've been doing this.
All right. And your podcast, which I've listened to a bunch of episodes, and it's very good, and you have some fantastic guests. You've been going for about 5 years, is that right?
Yeah, I think we're coming up on 6 in the spring.
Right. And what's the name of that podcast?
Renegade Radio.
Renegade Radio. So I'd recommend checking that out as well. So Jay, final question then. Escape Your Limits is about escaping what you've believed is impossible and then going on to make it possible. What would be a memorable example of you escaping your own personal limits?
Wow, what a great question. I guess, it's not going to seem huge, but the thing that comes to mind is because I grew up really scared of everything. I grew up scared of taking risks. I grew up scared of the kids that were going to beat me up. I was just scared. I was scared of noises. Like, I don't know why I was scared of everything. And so, I didn't even like to go over my friend's house. I wanted them to come over my house because I just needed to be in that security blanket. So for me to move across country, knowing nobody and being in this weird headspace and not loving myself and not being able to communicate like I wanted to, not having the confidence that I wanted to move across the country and to say, this is not who I am, who I was for the first 33 years of my life. That's not who I am. I'm going to make some massive changes. And to now have this life where I get to live in Southern California at the beach, have amazing friends, where I didn't have one close friend probably that whole time, if I really look back and I'm honest with myself, where now I have 7 best friends that I would give $1 million just to have one of them as my friend. And, to be able to do what I love, to have those people, to live here, and just living this life, it's crazy. I never thought I'd be able to do that. So I would say that.
Fantastic. Well, Jay, thank you very much for your time. Best of luck with everything in the future.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Let's keep in touch.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, then please go over to iTunes and subscribe to the Escape Your Limits podcast. Leave a review, leave a comment. It really would help us a lot to continue to keep these going.